Hi everybody, it's Amy from Winterwood Studio, and today I thought that I would open and swatch these Mungyo pastels on some Canson Mi-Teintes or Mi-Teintes pastel paper, and then do a drawing with them. This is the set of 64. I learned with this exact same set, well not this set, this set is brand new, it's still in the plastic, but my other set is old and missing colors and looks pretty ratty. So for the purposes of this video, I got a brand new set, and I mean it's super cheap. I think they were like $10, $8, somewhere in there for this set. I'm not 100% sure, I could be wrong. If I'm wrong, I'll put the right price down below in the link, but they're super cheap, and this is how I learned soft pastels. Is it the best paper? No, probably not. Is it the best pastels? No, probably not. Are they light fast? No, probably not, but they're great for learning, especially if you want to see if you even like it before you invest in any of the really, you know, big, expensive brands, which is exactly what I did. So I tried these first, and then, thanks to my husband, I got to invest in some of the big, expensive brands, and that video will be coming shortly. So let's open these and see what's in here. So there's like a protective sleeve, and then the box. There's some info here. I cannot read it. I wonder if it even, maybe it has light fast rating. I don't know, I can't read it. It'd be interesting to know. If anybody has a translation for this, let me know. And here we are. These are all the colors you get. They're a little bit worse for wear. I think maybe the truck shook them around a little bit. So these are your soft pastels, and then you get a harder black and a harder white for drawing and sketching. So that's really nice. A lot of sets, most sets don't really include that, especially any of the other sets that I bought. So let's move this out of the way, and let's swatch out all these colors. Okay, so I've got my paper towel for wiping my fingers. I'm going to swatch all of these out and maybe record my thoughts. Probably at some point I'll switch over to a time lapse, and then I will do a drawing with them, and that'll probably be a time lapse too, but I may do a voiceover, so we'll see what happens. So let's get swatching. So there are all the color swatches. This Mungyo set is very smooth and it goes on smooth. Let's do a little blending test here. It blends pretty well. I mean, this paper isn't the best. Obviously, it's going to blend better on like pastel matte or sanded paper or anything like that. But again, the thing I do like about pastel matte though is it fills up like the pores in the paper, and just to show you what I mean, if I go like this and I tap it, see all that powder that comes off? That doesn't happen when you're using pastel matte. I mean, you might get a very, very little bit, but like on a first layer like this, that wouldn't come off like that. It goes into the pores and fills it up, and it doesn't come off. So when people talk about like using fixatives for their work and stuff, it usually means to me that they're using a paper that maybe isn't the best paper. If you use something like the pastel matte, you don't have stuff coming off like that. But again, for learning and to see if you even like it, this set and the paper works great. There's that. Now let's do a drawing on a large sheet of paper. So the first thing I'm going to do is lighten up my lines on this sketch here. They're way too dark. So I'm going to start by putting in my darkest values first. And I'm going to talk a little bit about this paper too. I'm not used to using this paper. I didn't use this to learn on, as I said earlier in the little captions. I started with pastel matte and just got bigger sheets and cut them up into smaller, like 5x7 pieces when I first started practicing. And then I also had some cheap sanded paper that someone gave me, and I don't know what the brand was, so I can't help you out with that, but I've been using the UArt sanded paper, the 400 grit, and it's like $3 for a 9x12 sheet at Blick Art Materials, and if you buy 10, then it's like $2.75 a sheet. So it's pretty cheap, and that also works really well. I'm actually liking the sanded paper with my soft pastels a little more than the pastel matte. Pastel matte is great for doing details, especially if you're going to be using pastel pencils to do like really realistic animals, like you've seen me do in the fur. This paper that I'm using here, this is the Canson Mi-Teintes or Mi-Teintes, however you want to say it. And it has a very honeycomb-like texture that is extremely visible. You can see that I'm blending here with a blending stump, and no matter how much I blended, I just couldn't fill in that honeycomb texture very well. This paper isn't bad. It's fine for practicing on and doing sketches. I do kind of regret doing this piece on this paper, though, because I ended up really liking it. And the texture was very distracting. And the blending was very hard. And it didn't blend as much as I wanted it to. Hold the pastel very well, which I showed in the beginning when I was swatching the colors. It just sort of sat on the surface instead of filling in those honeycomb-like textures. That could have been a little bit because I was using cheaper pastels. I do plan to test my more expensive pastels on this paper and see how it goes. But I don't really think the problem was the pastels. Like I said, I learned with these soft pastels, and I didn't have a lot of trouble with them on the pastel matte or the sanded paper that my friend gave me. I don't think any of the problems I had were because of these pastels. I think it was because of the paper. So again, if you want to practice or sketch on here, that would be fine. And you know, in the end, I did have a finished piece that I liked. The only thing, like I said, was the distracting honeycomb texture, but I was able to do most of the techniques that I did on here. As you can see, I'm still adding in the dark values here and the lightest values, which is generally how I start. I try to get in the darkest of darks and the lightest of lights, and then I know those are the two, you know, endpoints, and to keep everything within that range. I used just the Mungyo pastels on here, plus their hard and soft black and white, and you'll see me use that, I think, later on. I'm just continuing to layer in the colors here. Oh, and another good tip is if you make a mistake, I don't think I showed that in this video, but if you make a mistake, You can take a stiff, like a hog bristle brush, like for oil painting, and take your whole painting outside and just brush it off. And that did work very well on this paper. Probably because the pastel wasn't sticking as well as I had hoped. I was able to brush any mistakes off pretty easily and then just go back over them with the other colors. The Mungyo pastels are pretty opaque and pretty vibrant. Of course, not as much as some of the higher ends, but they still have pretty beautiful results. Okay, so here I switched to my stand-up easel because the pastels were just pooling dust clouds on the paper, and it was just making a mess and getting in my way. And you're not supposed to blow pastels because, you know, the dust can, depending on the brand and what you're using, some of the components can be toxic, and you don't want that floating around in your house. So generally I would work standing up at the easel so that the dust can just fall down and collect in the bottom of the easel tray, and then always wipe it up with a damp cloth. Don't blow on it or use a dry cloth. You don't want that dust airborne if you can help it. You can't see here, but just off to the right of the end of my easel, there's an air purifier HEPA cleaner sitting there. So that helps some too. Try to have that on the highest setting to try to suck in some of that airborne dust and get it caught in the HEPA filter so you don't have to breathe that in. Some people work with a mask if it bothers them. I tend not to. I find the masks pretty... I wear glasses a lot, so they fuck up. So I'm still just layering in layers. I'm working the whole painting. I move around. I don't work on one spot till it's finished. I find that it's better to move around and just block in the whole thing, and then go back and try to get everything to the same amount of doneness and not just finish one area first. So I'm trying to put in some more darks here. The blending on this paper did not work as well as I'm used to with the other papers. And here I lost a whole bunch of footage. I was getting so frustrated with what I was working on. My camera shuts off automatically after 15 minutes of filming, and I just totally forgot to check it because I was getting so frustrated with how the blending was not going well for me on this paper. So sorry about that. I will do a video with the Mungyo on some UArt sanded paper that's coming, so you can see the difference. If you want to work in a pretty detailed style, this paper is definitely not for you. The looser and more impressionist your style is, I think this paper would work better for you. It's just really textured. I've heard of some people turning it over and working on the smoother side, but the problem with that is I think that it would hold even less layers than this side did. So again, like, if you're doing anything with lots of layers, this isn't the paper for you, unless you're just practicing. I have some videos coming with my newer, more expensive pastels, and I still stand by my statement that these Mungyo pastels are good for learning. Even after using the more expensive pastels, I feel like these are still a really good, cheap option for learning. You definitely don't need to bust out a lot of money for the more expensive soft pastels. These are quite a bit harder than the Sennelier or the Unison pastels. They're pretty similar to the Rembrandt soft pastels, I would say. The Prismacolor new pastels are harder than these. So they're more of a medium pastel, and they're great. I think they're great for learning with. Though, like I've said before, the only issue is I'm worried about the light fastness of them. I cannot find any light fast rating tests anywhere. So be aware of that. I mean, they do make UV glass for framing things that you're worried about fading. But unless you're buying the really museum-grade archival glass, it doesn't really protect it as much as people think it does. I've seen some tests and it doesn't do much. And also that museum grade UV glass is really hard to see through sometimes, so that can be a problem as well. Another big problem that I had with this paper is no matter what kind of brand of artist tape I used, it ripped every time I took the tape off. Every kind. I tried 4 different kinds of tape, and it's definitely the paper. I did the hairdryer test. I tried sticking it to my clothes first. It was definitely the paper. So that is something to be aware of as well. You could just try working to the edges. I really like to have that nice clean border around the edge, so that was a problem for me. I did not try washi tape, so that could be one more test that I could do to try. But in general, like the pastel mat won't do that. The sanded UArt paper doesn't do that. None of my watercolor papers do that. It was strictly this paper. I did not try the Strathmore pastel paper that I got with tape yet, so maybe that one does it too. I don't know, but this one, it was extremely hard to use any sort of tape on this, and that's how I like to work, so that's a little bit of a deal breaker for me, unless, like I said, I'm practicing or doing sketches. So there you saw me putting in some sky holes. Oh, here we are trying to peel the tape. I did end up having to cut that last piece of tape because I did end up swearing quite loudly at the tape. See, there it ripped. Yep. So, I don't know. It was rough with the tape. Anyway, I hope you liked this video. Please subscribe and like so I can build my art studio soon. And until next time, happy creating.